Welcome to the International Code Council Region 1 and Region 1 Radio Show. My name is Tim Spears. I'm the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014 and we're made up of 3 states, California, Nevada, and Hawaii. That also includes many ICC chapters. We are dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing individuals together. Our podcast aims to provide valuable information and insights to professionals in the building and fire safety industry. We cover a wide range of topics, such as industry updates, best practices, and we interview experts in the field. We also aim to engage our listeners by discussing many relevant topics. Whether you're a code official, a building inspector, architect, engineer, or someone that's interested in the building and fire safety industry, our podcast is for you. We believe by bringing individuals together to share knowledge and resources, we promote a building safety environment and contribute to the betterment of our communities. So if you want to stay informed and up to date on the latest developments in the building safety industry, be sure to tune in to ICC Region 1 Radio. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Ibrahim Jilani, Global Director and Industry Leader at UL Solutions. He is joining us to shed light on important issues related to fire prevention and product safety. Ibrahim has extensive experience in the field, and we're thrilled to have him on the podcast today. He shares his background and UL's role in ensuring product safety. We discuss the importance of independent evaluation and certification to ensure that products meet safety standards, and how UL evaluates engineering principles, construction, materials, and components. The conversation also examines or delves into potential dangers and hazards associated with lithium batteries used in micromobility devices. He explains the high energy density and the small form factor of lithium batteries, as well as the risk of thermal runaway that can lead to explosions and fires. The episode also discusses the development of UL 2849, a safety standard for e-bikes micromobility, which was influenced by incidents with hoverboards in 2015. This episode offers valuable insights into UL's role in ensuring product safety, the risks associated with lithium batteries, the development of safety standards, and the implementation of certification requirements. Listen in to gain a comprehensive understanding of these crucial topics and their impact on public safety. Ibrahim, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. We were talking a little bit before this. I attended the training that you did for the Southern California Fire Prevention Officers on micromobility and lithium battery technologies and the different work that UL is doing. And so I'm excited. I think this is a space that is ever evolving, and we're continuing to learn more and more, right?
Absolutely. UL in our history, we're just the type of company we look at ourselves as fire preventers and trying to help our fire service, of course, but also just being solution orientated and, try to help the market do what it wants to do in terms of new products and new innovation, but also with safety, security in mind and not forgetting those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we jump into, because I think that this is going to be a good topic, can you provide a little bit about your background and your position with UL?
So I joined UL in 2005, so approaching my 18th year now. I'm the son of an electrical engineer. My father had his own lighting company. He still does. So I saw UL at the dinner table when I was growing up. So kind of maybe the first time I did a UL test, I was 7 or 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
Because he used to do it in the garage. He would prepare samples before he shipped them to the UL Northbrook office.
Okay.
So a lot of different plastic enclosures. We had a freezer in the garage, and we used to prepare samples in the garage. And he'd have me run some abuse tests that he thought were important before he sent it off to UL. Then I joined when I was in my early 20s and did a lot of the certification work for motor controls and for different types of components and equipment. Over the years, I got involved with lithium battery operated products for the last 11 and did a lot of the work to build up some of our lithium battery operated product team that does the certification and does the evaluation work. as well as getting involved with new standards and new safety. And nowadays, I oversee the consumer technology sector as the consumer technology director.
Okay. Wow. So you had a very early introduction into kind of UL and the importance of safety that many of us probably, I'll be honest, when I was 7 or 8, I was not thinking one. I think I was thinking I was going to play football or baseball. I think football because I wasn't, my eye-hand coordination wasn't really good. So,
Yeah, my dad, he would leave so our table, our household kitchen table was all his engineering projects. It was soldering irons, circuit boards, resistors, relays, all kinds of stuff that you would find in a Radio Shack. And he just would be doing projects. And my mother would always be so upset that, more than half the table was covered in the stuff. But he was like, no, 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 the light's the best in this room. And he wanted that table to have that. And so, we being, curious little kids, we used to ask him about that stuff. What is you're making? What is it that you're, trying to design? And, he got us involved in some of the testing, my older brother and me. And that's kind of my intro into UL, and didn't really think about it until after college. And one of my buddies was working at UL, and I said, I know a lot about that company. It's like, I don't think they had somebody my age that has had the experience kind of, doing stuff in the house to prepare for UL submittals and see it from that side of the fence. And then, of course, then coming in and being a UL engineer, that's, trying to help always a manufacturer get through that process. It is, a difficult one where we're, asking a manufacturer to say, hey, we're going to be independent, we're going to be impartial, we're going to look
mhm.
at your product,
Yep.
we're going to see whether or not it meets standards. And we are not going to judge how much effort you put into it. We believe you, it's your blood, sweat, and tears. But
Right.
we also have to make sure that this is ready for the market and that it's got the fire, explosion, and electric shock hazards reduced and meeting the compliance of the standards.
Yeah. And you had the early introduction, really an early internship to UL, right?
That's
Uh,
what my dad actually calls it. He's like, but what's funny is he would always, like, during the course of a UL project that he would be involved in, it was stressful for him.
oh yeah.
But he always was still thankful at the end of it. He's like, man, what the guys at the UL engineers used to do and how they do what they do, it gave me such a positive impression that the work that was going on is actually, it's benefiting society. It's making
Mhm.
sure that people are going to be safe with the products that they have. Because even any manufacturer, any company that's designing a product, they put their best minds forward. They really try their best to make the best product. But
Mhm.
it's like a second set of eyes. You have to make sure somebody else is checking the work and independently evaluating it and independently making sure, are these products really ready for the market? And that's the whole purpose of a UL as an organization, is that we want to help keep things flowing for those that are trying to sell product, but to do it with the certifications and the right kinds of evidences that show that, yep, it's above the board, it's met the requirements.
Yeah, it's definitely had its rigorous tests to be able to evaluate to make sure that it's going to do what it's going to perform the way it says it's going to perform, right?
From a
Uh,
safety perspective, absolutely.
yeah,
And then, yes, and in performance aspects, in terms of, being able to perform on a product that lasts so many charge cycles or discharges, we always can do that as well. But that's not necessarily the first thing that we have to take care of. The first thing is make sure, does it have the right safety profile? And by
right.
safety profile, that doesn't just mean the testing. It
Mhm.
actually means, has the product been engineered with the right construction, with the right design principles, with the right materials and components that make it a safe product. And that's actually one of the important things that I hope the listeners and those that are watching take away from this conversation. There is no such thing as a UL safety test. It's always the UL safety standard.
Mhm.
And the certification is based on requirements of a standard. Two-thirds or more are going to be non-test related. So that gives you some indication of how much is going to be involved with engineering principles
Right.
and just generally making a product that has conformance to various construction and material and component requirements. Because oftentimes that's one of the things that happens. And when we get into this conversation of
Mhm.
micromobility, one of the things that I hear often is, oh, we've tested, or we're tested to the UL standard. I
Right.
said, well, that's great, but you actually have not complied to it yet, or demonstrated certification to it yet. So it's important for those in the fire service and those that are,
Mhm.
looking at this carefully, to understand the difference between certified to versus tested to.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's one of the things. And now, granted, our conversation is going to be more on the micromobility and the consumer products and those types of things. But even on some of the larger things, we see a lot of larger energy storage systems now employing lithium technologies and battery storages. And so, you bring up a good point as we talk about that. Now, really, this conversation, kind of wanted to focus on that micromobility and the lithium technology. Can you explain some of the potential dangers and hazards associated with lithium batteries, their impact on micromobility safety? I mean, we've kind of talked about what micromobility is, but maybe you could elaborate on what those kind of products are, that maybe some of us don't, or maybe somebody that's listening to this aren't aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. So, micromobility is first to qualify that, that's your e-bikes, e-scooters, e-mobility devices, and even hoverboards. Those are all considered micromobility products, things that are less than 20 miles per hour typically in terms of their max speed or in their max assistance to the user, like a pedal assisted e-bike. It doesn't give you more than 20 miles per hour of assistance. All of these types of end products, they're predicated on the fact that they use lithium batteries.
Hmm.
And not only is micromobility using lithium batteries, energy storages, everyday consumer and commercial electronics are. The
Hmm.
future products you're going to see that are related to mixed reality, virtual reality equipment, as well as consumer commercial robotics, which are entering the marketplace in big numbers now.
Hmm.
Those all are based on the fact that they're going to need some power source, and typically the lithium ion batteries is the number one choice. Lithium ion has the benefit of being highly energy dense and in a small form factor. So that makes it a very, promising, from a performance perspective, very promising technology to use and to utilize as the energy source.
Hmm.
The challenge is that lithium ion batteries can be prone to thermal runaway. And thermal runaway, as it's defined, is the release of thermal energy beyond the ability of this lithium cell or the lithium battery to dissipate that energy. So if the heat is being released from the cell, whether it's because of an internal issue inside of the cell, or whether some external pressure or some electrical issue that's been sent to the cells, whenever the thermal energy has increased to the point that it's now not being dissipated in a way that's safe, it goes into a state of runaway. And
Hmm.
state of runaway is what we know as the explosions and fires that occur from lithium ion batteries. And lithium ion batteries, the reason why they have this propensity versus other batteries, the materials used to make a lithium ion battery, some of them are highly flammable, and some of them release oxygen in the process of it getting overly heated.
Hmm.
So, the electrolyte and the separator material that's inside of the lithium cell, these are,
Okay.
building blocks of a lithium cell.
Hmm.
Um, if they overheat, they start to release their own oxygen. And as the heat and the oxygen are there, and you have flammable materials, you have the fire triangle. And
Right.
so now
Yeah.
you have a situation where the fire is going to erupt out of this thing, and it's also why it makes it putting it out so difficult because it's self-oxygenating.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you just kind of hit on it. It's kind of one of those self-sustaining reactions, right?
Until it all burns out, it's going to keep
Yeah.
reacting. Yeah.
Yeah, as it lets off that oxygen, it's just going to continue to burn, and it's going to burn. A fire is hot anyway, but I mean, you still have the heat source, you still have the oxygen, and you also have fuel. The packaging and those types of things. I mean, a lot of these products are made of plastics, or other combustible materials, but also too, like you mentioned, that battery itself has got some flammable properties as well, that we need to be prepared for. So we talk about that. What are some of the areas that like building professionals, fire safety professionals can identify in some of these potential hazards and risks associated with this type of technology? Especially as it relates back to micromobility and these lithium batteries. I mean, you hit on robotics. I know a lot of us, in my profession as a fire code official, we have a lot of automation now in our warehousing, and these robots are kind of like that, right? They've got
Yeah.
large batteries, and I would imagine that that's part of it. Now, I've not seen one of these go into thermal runaway, but I would imagine that there's some hazards. So, how can we better identify it as building and fire safety professionals?
So first, as building and fire safety professionals, question has to come to your mind is what are the laws in the United States as it relates to product safety?
Hmm.
The benefit you have in the workplace environment is that the Occupational Safety Health Administration, OSHA, has already put, since the 1970s till now, requirements that if anything electrical goes into a building or is used in a workplace, it needs to be third party certified. It needs to have an impartial, independent evaluation and testing to the safety standard that's applicable to that product. And they have the OSHA National Recognized Test Laboratory Program. It's a bit of a misnomer. They call it the National Recognized Test Laboratory Program, but in
Hmm.
reality, it's the National Recognized Certification Program. So these organizations are approved to certify these products. They're going to evaluate it, they're going to also test it, and then ultimately issue certification. So UL Solutions, as an example, is one of those national recognized test laboratories. We are accredited by OSHA, not just to be a national recognized test laboratory, but specifically the standards that we can do. And in the case of micromobility, UL 2849, UL 2272, which covers e-bikes and then the e-mobility devices, including e-scooters, we have achieved that through OSHA. OSHA has authorized that UL is got that in our scope of recognition. So those are really important concepts in terms of how the workplace environment is kept safe, because there is a workplace safety law, there is the OSHA NERDL program, and
Hmm.
then the scope of recognitions that are given to the certification organizations. Now flip that to the other side, to commercial environments or consumer environments.
Hmm.
And the New York City law that passed just in March, which was related to micromobility, that's the first time in the entire country that we've had a law for consumer safety of lithium battery operated products. There are some laws that relate to children's products
Hmm.
that involve lithium-ion, but generally speaking, at the federal, state, and at city level, in 11 years of dealing with lithium battery operated product safety, there really isn't a number laws for the products that we're buying either through online distribution or directly from a brick and mortar store that
Hmm.
required that those products go through any kind of independent and impartial third party certification. So that's the first light bulb. When you realize that, then you're like, okay, this is a big issue then for the fire service,
Yeah.
because whatever's coming into the country, whatever is going to be sold, doesn't necessarily have to meet any product safety laws to keep the public safe.
Right.
And I think New York City and what they've been dealing with micromobility has really exposed that. That they, in the last few years, got a lot of e-bikes and a lot of e-scooters that entered their market. A number of them were made in such a way that they were not compliant to any safety standard. Um, and then these lithium battery systems are large enough to go from being a it's a high potential of thermal runaway,
Hmm.
but maybe low risk if it's a smaller battery operated product, considering that the fire can maybe be controlled by a fire extinguisher or
Right.
having enough water to put it out. But once you're getting to the size of a micromobility battery pack, which is 10 to 100 times larger than a cell phone battery,
Hmm.
well, now you're dealing with something totally more the ability to explode and have a larger fire is just so much greater now,
Right.
so the risk comes up quite a bit. And because it's such a larger system, the fires get out of control much faster than had it been just a single cell type of product like a power bank or an e-vape equipment. But even those types of equipment, e-vape and power banks, there has been moves from various branches of governments, like FDA, for example,
Hmm.
mandated that e-vape equipment must be third-party certified, and they pointed to a UL standard, UL 8139 in 2019. They put that out there. In the case of power banks, there has been some strong industry associations like the Promotional Product Association International
Hmm.
(PPAI). That back in 2013, I was presenting on this back a decade ago. They made sure all their members that they agreed that they were going to be third party certified on power banks, and that helped
Right.
keep in that type of product and that type of industry low in the number of incidences. But
Okay.
as you go, from industry to industry, to product
Hmm.
type to product type, it becomes very daunting and very difficult that all the industry trade associations and all the groups of companies are going to agree the same way.
Right.
The better way would have been like, okay, if there had been some type of laws that kept it in place. So that I think, from the perspective of a building official and fire official, the best thing that can be done at this point is, okay, you can get some things into some of the codes, but it's been
Hmm.
very difficult to control. And even if you put in the codes, it's very difficult to control what some consumer will put in their home, or somebody else will put in their property, um, it's important to voice it and share your thoughts on what should be the way forward, and have your own associations, International Fire Chiefs, International Association of Firefighters, the National State Association of Fire Marshals, write to the federal and state officials saying, hey, we're in the fire service, we're seeing this increase in lithium battery operated product safety incidences, explosions, fires, death, injury, and property damage.
Right.
Can't we be better? And it surprises me, and maybe this is not known to people in the US, but there are so many laws in other countries that are protecting their citizens from lithium battery operated products. China has many laws, Japan, Taiwan. So we do see that because we work, UL is a global company. We do support our manufacturers that are entering in each market and how they, want to go to market in those countries. And in those countries, you'll find that there's laws that are, trying to mitigate the risk that's going to affect the population should, lithium battery operated product systems, never go through any type of evaluation or testing to its particular safety standard.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I know as a lot of us fire safety professionals, we look at or recommend or at least try to recommend at least some type of UL listing or something that's been tested to a nationally recognized testing standard.
Correct.
I know that many people are listening to this podcast that they or watching. They'll one way you can tell whether or not it's a listed product or tested, there should be a sticker on it. There should be some labeling on it. And Ibrahim's holding up. If you can't see it there at the bottom, you'll see a UL stamp there, showing that's a power bank that's been tested, at least to that standard, or that product's been tested that standard. And so those are always important. Now you talk about like how the micromobility, is different than maybe that power bank, right? There's a different energy potential, right? But what truly is that energy potential? I mean, it's bigger, right? But if we're going to talk about like, if we want to make a comparison about energy, right, and how that thermal runaway could pose a problem, what are we looking at in the
Sure.
terms of energy potential?
Yeah, so one of these power banks, this is your basic power bank, right? It's a rectangular one where you have, your input for the charging and the output to go to your device.
Hmm.
This type of power bank is one cell. It's actually a cylindrical cell that's been covered with this external casing. There's a
Okay.
circuit board up here that's going to help get from 5 volts down to the 3.7 or 4.2 volts that the cell is supposed to be charged at. So, it's one cell. When we get to micromobility, it's minimum 40 cells
Oh,
or
wow.
more. And so, the watt hour calculation, like this particular one, it's marked on the back here. The watt hours on this one is a 1 amp hour. So, or in other words, it's like 3.7 watt hour. It's not a very big amount of watt hours. For a micromobility battery pack, we're talking 500 watt hours up to 2 kilowatt hours. So
Wow.
you're not as large as an EV. You're not as big as like a typical EV is going to start at 50 kilowatt hours and bigger.
Hmm.
And a hybrid EV will be somewhere between 3 kilowatt hours to maybe 10 kilowatt hours. But e-bikes, they get well over 1 kilowatt hour now. We've seen products that are being submitted to us with that size of a battery, and it's one is for the battery, being bigger means that you can last longer or you can have larger power output depending on the type of cells you're using. There could be a higher currents that are pushed out of the cells, and that's maybe a performance use case versus a use case where you're trying to last longer throughout the day, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's probably how to think about this. A power bank will have a single cell, maybe up to 4 cells in it, and we're talking from like 5 watt hours up to maybe 50 watt hours for those type of products. And then we're talking for the micromobility, 400 watt hour, 500 watt hour, up to 2 kilowatt hour.
That's
2000 watt hours is the way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's a lot of energy.
huge factor, difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Exponential.
that's a huge fire risk, right? Waiting to happen in the sense that should something fail. And I think we've all seen videos. We've all seen videos of those micromobility things failing. Now, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about UL, the development of UL 2849, and the kind of that how it relates back to electrical systems for e-bikes and micromobility. Because I think a lot of us, I don't yet have a one of those e-bikes. I think that I see a lot of them, a lot of people riding them all around my neighborhood. I'd like to get one because maybe I don't have to do as much exercise. Um, but can you talk a little bit about the development of that standard
Yes,
and
yes.
the application of that?
It's 10 years. It took from the time it started to the time it was finally published, that was 7 years. And now
Okay.
it's 10 years later where it's finally mandated by one city in America. And we started the work on the e-bike standard back in 2013. One of the manufacturers approached UL saying, "Hey, we want to see a safety standard in this area. We think it's going to be a popular form of transport in the United States and Canada within the next 10 years." They were European-based companies, so they had already seen the uptick in Europe.
Mm,
We started on that process with them, and things were going fine. Then the hoverboard happened in 2015.
yeah.
And so the hoverboards of 2015, I was very involved in that. And that caused us to look at our safety standards and our system standards. We normally break out our standards into, is it a component-based document? Is it an end product-based document? Or is it a system-based document? And oftentimes, what you'll hear a lot of people say is like, oh, you just need to certify the component standard by UL, like the battery pack standard. And we put a timeout. We say, no, 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 no.
Hmm.
That standard has never been done to take into account the application in full that the battery pack or the battery cell is going to be put into. So you
Sure.
always have to look at the end product or system. In the case of the hoverboard, we realized this really goes beyond just being a product. This is a system because we have to take
Mhm.
into account the actual physical hoverboard, and then we have to take into account the charger that's going to connect to, and any peripheral. Sometimes there's swappable battery pack. Sometimes there was other electric motor upgrades or things like that that could be
Mhm.
appended onto this system. So we called it an electrical system standard. Um, from that learning of the hoverboard, we went back to what we had started drafting back in 2013 on the e-bike. We said, all right, we need to align how we're doing things on e-scooters and e-mobility devices and hoverboards to
Mhm.
what we need to be looking at for e-bikes. So
Right.
the e-bike standard, we went back and started writing out another outline. Normally, the process to make a standard is UL Solutions as a company, we will issue a outline of investigation. That
Okay.
is a seed document and it's also a document we can certify against, but it's a seed document to start the standards process. So when you have an outline of investigation, that means it hasn't gone through consensus, hasn't involved all the stakeholders of the industry to vet out the requirements, but it's UL's Solutions' best attempt at saying these are some requirements that we can now use, and it's published and it could be reviewed by anybody to say that now we're going to offer a safety certification on that. And normally UL's outlines of investigations, the safety requirements are pretty high. And
Right.
during the course of consensus, maybe some things are negotiated or come to some agreement between the manufacturing community, the supply chain community, the end users, the government, just the different stakeholder groups that take part in standard development.
Hmm.
Then eventually we get to a point in the middle. So something that's not necessarily this high, not necessarily this low as maybe what a manufacturing standard would be, but something in the middle that, all of these stakeholders can come into agreement that says, yeah, this covers the baseline safety profile.
Sure.
And so for 2849, that took 7 years. That took all the way till the publication in January 2nd, 2020, because there was just a lot of debate on what is a base electrical system for for an e-bike, and ultimately it became an electric motor, the e-bike motor control, the battery pack, the battery management system safety circuit, and the battery charger. So those are like the five big key elements, and that makes the electrical system of an e-bike.
Hmm.
So in order to certify an e-bike, all five of these things got to be checked. The battery pack's got to meet its requirements. The electric motor has to meet its requirements. The e-bike motor control has to be checked for software safety and for hardware reliability because
Okay.
it's controlling large systems, and
Right.
so does the battery management system. And then of course the battery charger also has to be checked for its ability to mate and work effectively and keep within the parameters of the charge currents and discharge currents and temperatures that the
Mm.
battery cells are expecting. So yeah, it passed with flying colors at that. By the time it got done in 2020,
Right.
everybody voted yes, and we were off to offering the certification program. And really what was unfortunate was while we went out and publicly talked at Consumer Electronics Show and other places in the country to say, hey, there's this program out for e-bikes. We want people to get ahead of it before it becomes a major issue in the US. Unfortunately, things unfolded the other way, where even though UL is out there saying this to the community of manufacturers are going to go back to asking the question, what is the law? Well, the law says for consumer safety, you don't have to be third-party certified. There's a strong, urgent request from the Consumer Product Safety Commission that all electrical equipment should be, gone through this process, but it's not a law for them. And yeah, and with the, honest to gosh, with the lithium battery operated products, going back to 2012, 2013 timeframe, when we were already having so many incidences with power banks and e-vape equipment and so many other lithium battery operated products. I mean, we should have had the light bulb go on that, hey, anything with lithium battery, that's the denominator. That's where we need to start and make sure anything with that kind of, chemistry involved as its recharging source, that to keep the public safe, to keep the products, as low as possible of risk of fire and explosion, there should be some third party involvement. So, me being the son of a guy that was a manufacturer, saw what it did for him, for my father and the products that he used to make, and applying those same concepts to this world of lithium battery operated products, is all I've tried to do. Try to share the public safety message, share that this is in benefit of society. This is in the benefit of everybody, that engineers that are trained in these products, that are understanding of the nature of the products, they evaluate, they've learned those standards, they know how to use the standard to check all the requirements, that they're given the respect by the manufacturer to do that process. And yes, we do come back oftentimes saying, hey, there is a compliance gap. Maybe there's something in your material selection or something in the traces of the circuit board that two traces are too close together, and that could cause a short that then ultimately could cause a fire explosion hazard.
Sure.
So those types of things are really important. But if the laws aren't there to back that up, then it just allows for unfortunate and unnecessary fire and explosion risk.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, looking at this is a system standard, and you're looking at each of the individual components. Now, does the 2890 or 2849 standard, does it reference maybe some other standards as kind of like a holistic approach? Like, hey, for the battery system, you have to comply with this standard. For the motor component, it's this standard. But then, UL 2849 encompasses all of that, right?
Right. Well, it makes sure the components meet their standards, and then the testing is also run on the e-bike itself. You're checking for things like water ingression, water ingress and locked rotor of the overload of the motor during some of the tests. So there are system level tests that need to be done. But before we get to the system level tests, are the components of the nature that they should be? Because you can't, you don't want to do a whole battery pack assessment by the time, if you're doing an e-bike and you have to do the battery pack, and you have to do the battery cell, and you have to do the e-motor, and then you have to do the charger, that for any manufacturer that goes through that, that's daunting. That's that's a big, tall order to ask. But if the components have come in and the manufacturers who are making the end product have given the instruction to the component and their own suppliers, here's what we need from you. Then when the packaging of it comes up to a system level, it gets very simple. Then the e-bike maker can just focus on the fact that they're meeting the 2849 requirements. Their components have already met the requirements. We can check those off, and then we focus on the e-bike motor control usually, and then the testing that's required per 2849. But in some cases, somebody had to do it. The very first time an e-bike maker is going to certify their product, oftentimes they're lining up their supply chain at that moment. So it becomes this situation where we have to do from cell all the way up to system to make sure that every part of it's been checked. And we have multiple projects going on, and different people are involved. Different UL engineers are involved with different parts of the supply chain. Sometimes we're working with the e-bike maker as well as the battery pack maker as well as the e-motor maker. So there's 2, 3, 4 levels of companies involved, and different engineers from UL and usually globally around the world, interfacing. I mean, we have a situation right now where some of the testing and evaluations going on in Taiwan, some of it's going on in Germany, some of it's going on in the US, but we're putting it all together and addressing this as a system. And ultimately, when the products are certified, then, the whole thing has been checked, all parts of it.
What's the time period? Like you just mentioned, this being a global company that's different locations looking at different maybe supply chain items to be able to make it, hopefully make the system a little bit better. But let's say I'm an e-bike manufacturer
Yeah.
and I want to submit one. And it sounds like you have some experience from your younger days of getting listings and those types of things. But what is kind of the process and the length of time to be able to from that process to be able to submit it to UL to be able to get that approval.
Yeah. The cool thing is this. If a manufacturer has done their homework and is prepared, that they have documentation and samples ready to go, it won't take more than 6 or 8 weeks to get done with
Okay,
the process.
that's pretty
But if
quick.
we, yeah, it's but remember our in the business of product certification, our customer is our vendor.
Mm,
We have to ask the customer to provide the technical documentation, bill of materials, construction diagrams, mode of operation instructions, different things that are very technical in their nature. So we have to talk to those engineers that are involved in that. We
right.
also have to ask for the samples to be prepared. We may need 3 samples of the e-bike, maybe a few of the battery pack, depending on how what's being submitted. Sometimes manufacturers are submitting a family of models at a time,
Mm,
saying, "Hey, look, we have one base design, but it's actually being used across 10 e-bikes." And we say, "Great, it's one design. We're only doing one project then," and then we'll just make sure that the nuances as it changes per these model lines, as long as they're not safety critical, we don't have to repeat any testing. But if there's some changes that require us to look at aspects of the design differently on a set of them, let's say there was 10 of them and 3 of them have this setup and the other 6 or 7 have this setup, well, we
uh-huh.
have to make sure we check that nuance. And we're not going to say the test results from those 6 or 7 represent the test results of those 3. We have to test for those 3 for those specific tests where we think that are not being covered by the original 6 or 7 that models that we tested for that situation. So all of that, work to do all that, and especially since the e-bike makers, a lot of them have never gone through third-party certification. Many of them have done third-party testing, but like I
Hmm.
said, certified to and tested to, totally different concepts.
Yeah.
Certified to requires organizations to be ISO 17065
Hmm.
accredited. So UL is, for example, we're 17065. We are also 17025. So ISO 17025 is for testing organizations. ISO 17065 is for certification organizations. Whole lot more requirements for a certification organization. We got to keep the quality records of our engineers. We got to show impartiality, independence, that we are not, no commercial leader and no pressures on any engineer in terms of making a certification decision. They are free from that process. So there's all kinds of controls and things that are documented that need to be demonstrated to the accreditor to show that yes, why we're able to certify and how we keep independent, impartial, and integrity in the process. While test labs tend to have only a focus on the equipment and
Hmm.
the sort of calibration records of the equipment, which is kind of a different concept. But nonetheless, 6 to 8 weeks if somebody's prepared. If they're not prepared, it could go 12 to 16 weeks. So we have some cases that can take up to 4 months to get through. And it's just really about how prepared and how willing the manufacturer is working with us. If they say that they open the project, but they don't send any bill of material, they don't send any
Hmm.
samples, well, the project's going to take as long as it takes for them to get us those items and then add 6 weeks to 8 weeks. You know what I mean? So if we started the project today and nothing came in until July, then we're talking maybe September the project and that there's no non-compliance issues, then it's
Right.
possible for September. But if a non-compliance emerges, we're going to have to discuss it, see is it resolvable or is it going to require some type of redesign.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you just mentioned, whether or not the issue is resolvable. Do we need to go back to the drawing board? And I would imagine that product vendors, if you mentioned earlier that their clients that they're seeking this approval. I would imagine most that submit things to UL for that testing are going to be prepared, right? They're going to hopefully be ready to go, be able to get things because I would imagine that they have a sense of urgency in them of themselves to be able to get this product to market and hopefully be able to get it approved and start selling it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Manufacturers are pretty mature. I mean, if they're going to be approaching us, they've already done some thinking about this. Obviously, it's not a overnight type of decision. In some cases, maybe their customer has put the pressure on them, saying, if I don't see it certified, we're not buying it. So in
Mm,
those cases, it can be a little bit harder because they're they're gearing up for certification while at
Yeah.
the same time, issuing a PO to us and go do the project. And we're saying, well, okay, you need to prepare certain things in order for us to be able to even understand your product. And so, sometimes those things run into each other.
You highlighted the importance, the difference really, being third party tested or third party certified. A lot of times when we buy products, we'll see that, hey, it's been tested by a third party, but it not necessarily been certified by a
Yeah,
third.
certified, you're going to find the certification mark. And
Yeah.
UL uses two for end products. And here's this one again, which is the
Yep.
UL mark in a circle and says the word listed.
Yep.
And then we're using more often now with lithium battery operated products. This is an e-vape equipment one. We use the holographic label
Okay.
to, and this holographic label is to combat counterfeiting. And so, we do this not only for e-vape equipment, we require it for e-bikes. So if you see this holographic label, that's how you know the e-bike's been genuinely UL certified. We're also using it for the hoverboards and e-scooters as well. So certain product categories where we felt like there could be high risk of counterfeit, we use
Hmm.
it. And it's funny too that not only is it coming on the lithium battery operated products that we use that kind of label, but little things like night lights. So this was my daughter's night light since she was, this is 12 years old night light. But
Right.
you go and you buy it and it has the holographic label to show that it's a genuine UL 1786 certified oh sorry, I put it backwards. 1786 certified night light. So what I like about this, and this I keep for a very good reason, is I like to ask people the question: out of these two products, a power bank or a night light, which has no lithium battery in it, which one is higher risk?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, because you've got the nightlight that's got,
It's
it's
got
got,
electric shock hazard
yep,
because
yep,
when you plug it in, it's touching 120 volt
right,
AC.
yep,
So it has the opportunity for electric shock, even though the bulb that goes in its socket will usually be a very low
right,
voltage,
yep,
or sorry, low current type of bulb. It doesn't need a lot
yep,
of current. And then, of course, this people have assumed because it's a low voltage, it's 5 volts or
yeah,
3.7 volts,
yeah,
that all of a sudden that it doesn't have any risk. But
yeah,
the explosion and fire risk is within this
much
product.
higher.
The
Yeah,
electric shock risk is within this product.
yep.
And so, that's kind of one thing to think about. In the fire service, this one should be the one that
Focus.
yeah, and it has obviously
Yeah,
got the attention of everybody to pay attention more to it.
yep,
And what's interesting from a code perspective, you can control this one a lot more because
yes,
it's got the prongs it plugs in.
yep,
This one, because it doesn't have the 120 volt prongs, all of a sudden there was no sections in the codes for these kind of things.
right,
And
yep,
now we're seeing in the last 5 years that the codes are starting to catch up and say, you know what? We need to make sure that lithium battery operated products are called out in the codes. And it's a great thing to do, that the codes need to show that, just like there was a list of the electrical products that
yep,
had prongs, the list of products, and by the way, I maintain that list. I have a 20 standard list of battery and battery operated products for that reason. Where if anyone ever asks, like, what are the battery operated product standards of UL? Boom, there it is,
yeah,
and you can get that reference in a code document, or the best case would be referenced in some type of legal law or bill that says that these standards must be adhered to for consumer public safety.
yeah. And it sounds like it's a good area for those that are in the code development world to start looking a little bit closer at these lithium-ion battery technologies, or just really lithium battery technologies, and working them into the code development part of it. No different than maybe we do with other types of equipment, electrical equipment, and those types of things. Um, we've talked a little bit about the New York legislation, the New York City legislation, mandating the third-party certification of the micromobility devices and batteries. Can you speak a little bit about that adoption, that process, but then also to how does this, what we see in New York, maybe then have there been other cities that have approached UL to also talk about, this type of certification for their cities or even states?
Thank you for asking that. So New York, 2 years ago, they started to notice that, wait a minute, there's a lot of fires happening related to lithium battery operated products. And as they dug deeper, they realized that it's happening with a lot of the e-bikes and e-scooters. So they had about 100 fires in 2021. They had over 200 in 2022, and they've already crossed the 100+ mark this year, and they had 7 deaths this year, including last night or the night before. Two more people have died because of a lithium battery operated product, and it was either an e-bike or e-scooter, according to the FDNY, that caught on fire and then ultimately took the lives of the 2 people that had passed. So they've had in total, I think the death is now that death total in the last 2+ years is over 20 people in the city, and the property damage has been immense. Just a couple months ago, or not even 2 months ago, in the Bronx, they had a 200 firefighter 5-alarm fire that took down a supermarket because the e-scooter caught on fire next to some combustibles, and those combustibles took off, and then the shopping center, which included a grocery store, a laundromat, and some other local businesses, is gone. And so, thankfully they saved, the fire department was able to save a lot of lives, but they had to have 200 firefighters to try to put that thing out. And that's an unfortunate safety risk and a very unfortunate set of circumstances. And again, it goes back to that e-scooter not having any regulation around it. So New York City, under the city councilman, they started getting a lot of calls from the FDNY. The FDNY was also very open to talk to the press to say, this is what's going on in our city. We're seeing all these types of fires emerge. And FDNY is a very trained fire department. They understand the UL safety standards. They've been working on the UL safety standards with UL since the inception of the company in 1894. So a lot of the fire service has participated in UL safety standards, and they're well aware of the different ones: energy storage, EV batteries, and of course micromobility as well. So they started telling the city council, like, these are the standards that are applicable: 2849, 2272 for the e-scooters and e-mobility devices, and UL 2271 for the light electric vehicle batteries for cases where there's a replacement battery pack or a swappable battery pack. So those 3 standards got called out by the FDNY, went over to the city council. The city council started getting a bill in place, and it was led by one of their councilmen, Feliz Oswald, that he put together a bill that said, look, these are the standards that we want to apply for the sale, for the distribution of, and for the ability to be even used in the city. These are the standards that are applicable, and the requirement is they must be certified, and that we're going to require that, and it's going to be effective 180 days after this is signed. And it was signed by the mayor on March 20th, and now it's going to be September 16th, roughly. That's 180 days later, where pretty much the city is going to say at that moment, everything needs to be certified in the city. And I have a feeling there could be a sweep that's done of the city. And the FDNY might be doing a sweep and checking to see if anything shows up that's uncertified, that they're starting to remove, because it's just too big of a fire risk for the buildings, too big of the fire risk for the public spaces within the city. And because I was involved so much with this, law, one of the folks from UL, Dr. Rob Sloan, he's based in New York. He works at UL. He was in attendance over there, and and the mayor gave him, when the law was signed, it was called Initiative 663-A. Rob was given the pen, and he shipped it over to me. So I have that wonderful, story that the pen is mightier than the sword, as they say. Yeah. And Mayor Eric Adams, used his position to help keep the citizens of New York City safe. And that's the example. That's where we should talk about, well, what should other cities, what should other states do? New York City Council, New York Mayor, they figured it out to say that they're going to start doing this. And hopefully with the result of this, it's going to make things a lot better towards the end of this year into next year. Now they're still in this phase where it's not an effective law yet. So they have to deal with everybody still having uncertified equipment. The question I have for most of the fire service around the country is the metrics. What have you classified as lithium battery operated product fires in your cities, in your municipalities? How are you tracking that? Because a lot of times the lithium battery operated product is not being tracked in a way that you can hone in and see how many fires have emerged. A few years ago, when the CPSC tried to do this study, they published a report in 2018. And they said from 2012 to mid 2017, there was 25,000 incidences with lithium battery operated product. So that's a data point that was, should be shocking for everybody. And that's before the e-bike situations had really emerged. But enough incidences like that being reported, and if more of the fire departments and the fire service is able to published, for Southern California, this is what the report looks like. For,
Right.
the ICC, region one, this is how much we're seeing in Hawaii and in California and in other places. Being able to articulate that is the eye opener for the media. And then the media will start asking questions to the city councils or to the state, Senate saying, hey, is enough being done keeping the citizens, the public safe of these products? Because the public thinks that everything they're buying has met
Safe.
some
Yeah.
level of requirement.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's not true. And I think that's the shocker. And probably people who are listening are, thought that maybe some products that they were buying, even, wireless headphones, there's no requirement that a wireless headphone has to be third-party tested, certified, evaluated and tested and certified, which, there have been many cases you can look up. There are cases where people have filed lawsuits because they had exploded headphone. The headphone exploded
Wow.
in their ear, blew away from their ear, or caused damage to their hearing or their head. So, those things are happening. And it's not to say that just because things are certified, all risk is gone.
Right.
But
Right.
it is what it is saying is that as much as humanly possible, the risk was checked. And
Yes.
that the risk was not, when we don't do third-party certification, we are allowing ourselves to say that we're rolling the dice. We're just going to assume that the self-declared status that the manufacturer has provided that the product is safe is
Mhm.
enough to keep the citizen safe. And history will tell us for electrical products, and that's why we, the company of UL even came into existence, is because Thomas Alva Edison and Nikola Tesla battled it out what
Yeah.
electricity should be and shouldn't be. And the insurance industry of America said, well, while you guys are battling out who's going to commercially going to win, we're going to have to battle out how we're going to protect and safeguard our policies, because all these things, all this electrical equipment going into buildings, and if something catches on fire, the policy that we've issued to that company, we're going to have to pay out,
Right.
premiums. And so I think even the insurance industry nowadays is really paying attention. There was even one lawsuit this past year where an e-bike manufacturer is being sued by one of the major insurance companies because the policy they had to pay out to their policyholder, the root cause of the fire reported by the fire marshal of that town was it came from this e-bike. So now the e-bike company is being held accountable by the insurance company. So these things are important to track the risk, and also who's going to suffer consequences if this risk is not under control. Number one is the fire service, and number two is going to be people like the insurance industry.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned reporting, and I know that this is one of the areas that might actually take, some changes, regulation changes, as it talks about our national fire reporting system. All of our fire agencies will report into the system, but being able to classify fires that relate back to lithium battery technologies is probably, it sounds like to you, a big thing or a major change that probably needs to occur. So that way we know where these fires are happening, what type of fires that are happening associated with these types of devices. I think it's going to be imperative. This is a relatively new technology that we're still trying to, as you mentioned, 2015 was, even probably 2012, and the vape, the e-cigarettes and those types of things, but then really, kind of propelled or, moved forward quite a bit in 2015 with the hoverboards. So,
Yeah, actually, if you track lithium battery technology, lithium batteries got commercialized in the 90s, but the only product you would find a lithium battery in was a laptop.
yeah,
And the people who made the laptop were the same people making the lithium batteries. Very tight control between the lithium battery manufacturer and the laptop manufacturer. They were the same company. And then comes the 2000s, and even cell phones, they still use nickel metal hydride. They didn't use lithium. Then the smartphones started coming out, and the digital cameras started coming out with a lot more power.
mhm,
The digital cameras were the first to get lithium batteries outside of the laptops. Then the smartphones. Then people realized, well, wait a minute, these and power tools as well. Those are the kind of like the three big ones: power tools, digital cameras, and smartphones. And then people realized that form factor that's used for the power tools. Well, wait a minute, we could use that for a lot of other things, including EVs, including e-mobility devices, including e-vape equipment, and so on. So then really it's been 2010 onwards where you saw proliferation of lithium ion battery technology across dozens, if not hundreds of product types.
Hmm.
Before that, it was in the single digit product types. Like, you would not have it widespread across every product. Most products were using nickel metal hydride or nickel cadmium as a battery source, not lithium ion. Um, and then in those years from 2010 till now, um, the laws, they're just not catching up. And now enough damage and crises have emerged, including the New York City crisis, that's awoken many people. I think the fire service has been aware that this has been an issue for some time.
Hmm.
But how do you get everybody else, the community of people in the public, the lawmakers, the other stakeholders, to be paying attention to it as much and as closely as how the fire service is seeing it? So I think that's, and also the electrical and building inspectors, how closely you guys are seeing it. So the more the voices are able to channel and unanimously talk to the lawmakers in your vicinities, the more things can get accomplished. So I do want to encourage that let your voice be known and write letters. Talk to your industry associations, talk to your the groups that you belong to. ICC Region 1 could write their own letter and say, this is what we think we should have as something. And if you have questions about what are the safety certification programs, what are the safety standards, that's something you could always approach UL on. We're happy to answer those questions and give you guidance. That's actually been the job that I've had for the last few years, is really, and I've kind of told that to my leadership. I said, look, somebody's got to go out there and tell people what these standards are and what these certification programs are, because or it goes sideways. There's no coordination between everybody's proposed solutions, and if everybody has their own proposed solution, it just becomes chaotic in terms of, okay, this state's going to require this state's going to require this, and then manufacturers are going to have a hard time trying to make a product that will meet the requirements that are being published, but also we're all going to just get confused, like what kind of product should we use and where. So.
Yeah. Now we're talking where we're at. We've talked about the past, the present. Now looking to the future, because I think that the lithium technology is going to continue to evolve. And there's going to be some emerging challenges, right? There's going to be some things, as we've kind of seen that over the course of the last 10 years. So, if kind of looking in your crystal ball, what are some of those challenges? Are we going to be more safe, less safe? Are there going to be, products that are coming down that we're going to be scratching our heads about? Kind of where do you see the industry moving?
Tim, brace yourself. It's gonna get, and I'm not kidding around, it's gonna get worse. There's a lot of products coming out with lithium batteries, and it's the same issue that there's no laws around it. Starting with mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. We just finished a standard, UL Standards and Engagement, one of our companies in the UL enterprise, published on April 28th, the world's first safety standard for this type of equipment. Because right now, if you look at any head-mounted display that goes onto anybody in their home, there was no real safety requirement for that.
Wow.
There has been a general consumer electronic safety standard, but nothing specific to the equipment and the kind of hazards that you might have with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Those battery packs are not that big, so the good news is they're not going to be more than maybe 50 watt hours. They're going to be about the size of other consumer electronic products. The two or three areas that's going to increase is going to be, number one, consumer commercial robotics. So in Japan, in China, it's already very common that people are living with different kinds of robots. And when they're going out and about, there's robots all around you. I just recently went for a dinner with my children at a sushi restaurant. And at that sushi restaurant was the robot that was moving around, the serve bot, that was where you could put your drinks on that robot and it zips past you and it zips back. And those are all lithium battery operated products. And those are all the size of a micromobility or bigger in terms of the battery packs. 500 watt hours up to 2 kilowatt hour battery packs. So there's got to be some careful understanding from the laws about these kind of products, that okay, these kind of products need to be under control and not repeat what took place with micromobility.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the EV makers, the regulators are different for the EV industry than it is for the consumer products or these kind of commercial products.
Right.
So when we talk about transportation sector, when something becomes an EV, the general premise of the Department of Transportation is more on a self-declared methodology. There is testing that's done, but no evaluation, no third party is actually checking the actual designs of the battery packs, of the electrical systems that are being put into the EVs to ensure that they are, compatible systems. And we've already heard some cases of some stories of EV makers and some of them established, some of them that have now started to introduce big lineups of EV products that,
Hmm.
consumers are starting to have some issues with. And even, bulletins that have gone out that say, hey, don't park your car in your garage. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible that we would say that to the public. We're offering a product, but then we don't want you to trust it to be put in your own home.
Right.
So on that front, on the EV front, as we migrate towards that future, well, what are the safeguards? Where are the safeguards that are going to make sure that EVs have to go through third-party process similar to what we would want a consumer or built environment or a electrical product in a workplace? So I think that's the biggest question mark, is that as more people switch over to EVs, how do we make sure that the EV manufacturers are held to the same level of independent,
Hmm.
impartial integrity of a third party checking their work
Right.
prior to it being released on the market?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to think about, especially as we go into the next decade here, and as we're, starting to move into the future, like you just said, robotics. I mean, we talked about robotics earlier, but it's becoming more commonplace. We're
I
starting to
think
see.
California, you've already seen a number of company, there's options out there for consumers to buy robots for their homes. It's going to hit the rest of the country soon enough, but in California, it's already happening.
I mean,
Yeah.
even your little Roombas, right? The your vacuums. I saw the other day I can buy one to mow my lawn.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean,
And they're going to be
there's.
stored in your garage. They're going to be stored in places where there could be other combustibles. So,
Oh yeah.
that's fuel. If anything goes wrong, how much time do you really have to be able to get out of the situation?
Yeah, exactly. And we know that it takes a lot of water for these types of fires. We talk about EVs and we see the EV fires, but I would imagine that micromobility, we've talked about the energy capacity, that it's going to take a lot of water to be able to suppress it, be able to
Yeah.
cool it
Yeah.
enough.
And home energy storage as well.
Yeah.
Those are very large battery packs for the home energy storage as well.
Yep, yep. So as we wrap up today's podcast, can you share a little bit where UL, or what resources UL offers to help building safety professionals, where they can stay informed, ensure that where we can stay informed on the safety of lithium-ion batteries, and where maybe we can direct others to find that information.
We have a publication that's headed up by our code and regulatory service group. It's called the Code Authority, a TCA document. So I'm going to send you a link, Tim, and maybe we can put that into the podcast.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show
Sort of-
notes. Yeah.
yeah, the show notes. I'll send you a link for that. I'll also give you a copy of the battery and battery operated product safety standards list, which is a great reference for anybody in the fire service. Say, okay, these are the standards that are commonly being used for lithium battery and battery operated products that touch homes or workplaces. And then also on ul.com, we're constantly putting in our news feed different things that we're doing for product safety, and the webinars and the
Hmm.
insight articles and the other content that's going to be critical for fire professionals. We're putting that on the website on a regular basis. So I'll send you the link to the Code Authority document that our code and regulatory service team, you
Okay.
mentioned to me before the call, John Tacker, the group that
Yeah.
he's a part of. There's another gentleman named Bruce Johnson who's based
Yep.
in Long Island. He does a lot of the work for that. And Howard Hopper, of course, is the godfather
Yes.
in the regulatory service teams. So
Right.
yeah, he's those three gentlemen and others. They get involved in Maggie Carroll, who works on the electrical side. They try to give information that's very relevant to the building, electrical, fire code folks, and I'll make sure that that gets out there. But that's part and parcel of who UL is. That yes, we're out there trying to work with manufacturers, trying to make sure that we have a business that's operating. But the mission is what drives the behavior. We're
Yeah.
all really dedicated to the fact that we want to see explosion, fire, electric shock risk reduced to the absolute minimum. We want to see that cybersecurity and other security concerns are down to the absolute minimum. And more recently, we have been paying a lot of our focus and a lot of our R&D dollars on the sustainability efforts. One
Hmm.
of the things we really didn't talk about, and maybe in the future we can, is that lithium cells, the recyclability of lithium is
Oh
one of
yeah.
the most challenging
Yep.
and unfortunate situations with the technology,
Yeah.
where most of the design, the products that have been made, they don't have a good plan for recyclability. They
Hmm.
may have a plan for repurposing. So we do hear about, EV batteries being used in stationary energy storage applications. But even after that's done, what do you do with that
Right.
how do you get out the lithium and the other precious metals,
Yeah.
and be able to reuse it for the next product? In contrast that to the lead acid market, the lead acid battery is almost 97% recyclable. But
Yep.
in the lithium, I think it's like 5 to 7%. So it's a
Really.
really different situation that's going on, and we just keep increasing the production of lithium ion batteries and lithium ion battery operated products. But the ability to deconstruct as as well as construct new products, we have to be able to deconstruct, have that plan in mind at the start of a building of a product.
Yeah, like you said, sustainability and being able to recycle. I know that one of an agency here in California had a fire at a battery recycling facility
Yeah,
with
that's also
lithium
happening. Yeah,
batteries. Yeah.
yeah.
And so how do we recycle them? How do we, dispose of them? But those are all things that, I think that people are, not necessarily, I think we all think it's safe, right? We have a lot of these products in our home. We all think that they're safe. And for the most part, they are, but there are some hazards that are associated with them that we all need to be prepared and we need to, be more informed on. So, but
Absolutely.
Ibrahim, thank you for taking the time in today's podcast. I know that you're really busy, and I'm glad that you were able to sit with us for an hour. This has definitely been very informational, and we talked to earlier about how the lithium-ion battery and really lithium technology is continuing to expand. And I think that this will hopefully only be volume one of our conversation. Maybe we can have a future conversation as we
Sure.
talk a little bit more about lithium battery technologies because. I would imagine that over the course of the next several years, we're going to continue to see some of these things, like you just said, that things are ramping up. They're not cooling off. They're definitely ramping up. So,
Yep, yep, yep. And unless the laws change, it's just going to get worse, unfortunately. Unfortunately. And so that's where I want, leave that nugget for your audience. How do we as a community of people who care about public safety and addressing public safety through product safety, how do we help the laws get better?
yeah,
So,
yeah. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up today?
no, I really appreciate it so much to be able to speak with you. And generally speaking, I'm a big proponent of uh, the ability to be a fire preventer, to help our fire service do what they do so well throughout the country, and that is really just help people, fight fires as well as mitigate those risks as much as possible. As we can mitigate it together, let's go onwards together on that.
All right. Thanks, Ibram. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed our conversation today, and until next time.